Welcome to the Cattlemen. I'm your host, Seth King. We're sitting down with Jennifer Lewis. Um, I've known Jennifer for a little while. She's with Wakefield Farms out of Ellensburg, Washington. Um, Jennifer, thanks so much for sitting down with us. I saw recently that you had posted a bunch on the Northwest Regional page about color. It has been a hot topic. It's always been a hot topic, I feel like, but even more recently, probably for several reasons. Color is just a really big it's a selling point. It's something people use for marketing, and that's not really something we need to go in, but because of all of these factors, it's a huge it plays a huge role in the Highland breed right now. So Jennifer, I just want to welcome you. Thank you again for sitting down with us. And I'm gonna let you talk. I feel like I've been talking the whole time here. So Jennifer, if you don't mind, kind of introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about your background and your farm and your cattle.
So I always describe myself as an accidental Highland breeder. It wasn't something that I set out to do. We kind of accidentally bought a farm, which is a long story, but we kind of accidentally bought a farm. And then I quit my job and started spending more time here. And my son is the one who remembered how much I loved Highland cattle when we would go to the fair. And he's the one who convinced me that, oh, you just need a couple heifers. Well, next thing you know, I have more than just a couple heifers. And I'm going down the registered path. And in some ways, it's almost a story that a lot of Highland breeders have, in that they just wanted a couple of lawnmowers, and next thing you know, they're deeper into it than they thought. So I grew up on an orchard, probably about 2.5 hours north of here. My dad's family homesteaded a valley, and they were orchardists, and my grandfather was a cattleman. He had a cattle ranch actually about 20 minutes from where this farm is. It's all coincidental. When we set up this farm, my son got that old brand reinstated. So we use that family brand when we run commercial cattle. So the name comes from the orchard that I grew up on, which was referred to as the Wakefield Orchard, because it was across the road from the Wakefield train stop. Really, it was very original, but that's what we took. And it's just been this huge growth. I have a background in horses well, my parents tried to kill me on a Shetland pony when I was 5. So I have decades of experience in the horse world. But cattle are different than horses. They're just not the same. You have to work to kill a cow. You don't have to work to kill a horse.
I've heard that.
So yeah, so I have all these experiences and other things that I've brought to breeding and raising my Highland cattle. And it's definitely probably what I was always meant to do. I just took all these detours doing other stuff. So it's a very exciting thing for me. And it's led to a lot of volunteer work. I was the president for our Northwest Association for 2 years in a row. I've got somebody else in that role now. I'm obviously still on that board, since I'm the Northwest's representative to the ACA board. So, and anybody who has had doubts about getting involved, really, they should get involved. It's very, very rewarding. The Highland world is a wonderful world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's something that comes up all the time when we do these podcasts is the regional associations and how helpful they are. Just, I think more than anything, geographically, you have those resources that are so much closer to you. It feels like a smaller community. It is a smaller community. So that's yeah, that's really, I'm sure that's really encouraging for the listeners to hear that. And then you're also on some other committees as well, or committee as well, correct?
I am. So as a member of the ACA board, you usually get involved in committees. So I'm on the genomics subcommittee, I'm on the education subcommittee, I'm on the website subcommittee, and I'm rolling off of the nominations committee here shortly because we've done our work for the year. We're just wrapping that up. So and I love working on those subcommittees. I just think it's just to be involved and to help have a voice in the direction that the Highland cattle world is going to go in is is just amazing. I just love doing it.
Right. And it's all volunteer work. Thank you for the
All
time
volunteer.
that you've put in. Obviously, you stay really busy, so thank you for your time and dedication. Very cool. I feel like I could talk to you probably for the rest of the episode just about your farm and how it all started. But we'll move in because maybe we can do another interview at some point, Jennifer, because I feel like we could talk quite a bit more about all of that. But let's move into color when it comes to the Highland breed. Um, I I feel like in a lot of ways I represent new breeders because I am a new breeder. But also I don't know a lot about the breed. There's people that get started in the breed and they research and seek out mentors, and they're flooded with information and they learn a lot quickly. I feel like I kind of move a little bit slower, whereas my wife, she's the one who does all the research. So with all that said, I guess what I'm trying to say is explain to me color in the breed like I am brand new, if that makes sense. Um, so I guess to start out, what historically were the dominant colors in the Highland breed? Is that a good place to start? Does that make sense?
It is actually, yeah, no, and it is a good place to start because when you go back and you look at paintings from the 1700s, the 1800s, all of the colors were represented. In fact, there was probably a color that we no longer have in the breed, which was brown. It's theorized anyway. It's kind of, oh, I might get photobombed by my cat.
Oh yeah,
So
we had
I may have to suddenly
ourselves.
grab a cat by the scruff of the neck. But it's all of the colors are in some of those paintings. And so all of the colors were there. It got to be a little regional in Scotland because the color of the cattle on the islands were almost all black. The Kylos. Kylo was the name for cattle. It wasn't a specific cattle type. It was like all cattle were Kylo. But they would talk about the black Kylo. And those were mostly the cattle that would come off of the islands. The reds would tend to come more out of the lowlands, less out of, they were the landed gentry. It was a color that the landed gentry liked. They also liked it because red cattle look bigger in the distance than black cattle do.
Okay.
It's an odd, colors perspective thing. And so they developed a liking for the reds. And over time, there were fewer and fewer blacks. And in fact, when I would talk to Angus Mackay, there is one specific black Highland bull that probably all of our current black cattle go back to. So that color probably only exists because of him, which is interesting because black is a dominant color. And so if an animal carries a black gene, they're going to be black. So, those early herd book founders did a good job of breeding for a color that, that they preferred to see because they looked bigger. Now in the United States, we had all of the colors too, but the way we would describe them was a little bit different. We didn't know at that time all of the genetics behind the colors that we would see. So the classic example is when you go to the herd book, animal number 1 is a bull. His name is Blue Hill. Blue because he was a dun, Hill for that family's herd of cattle. So, they were really creative. The dun is Blue Hill. So they used the name, they used the reference blue for a lot of those duns. Okay. Then when you look at other species like Kerry Blue Terriers, they are a gray animal. They just have kind of this bluish look.
Like the blue, kind of something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So they didn't understand the color genetics. So they just, whatever they saw, they just gave it a name. A yellowish dun animal might be referred to as yellow, and a classic yellow, which is a red-based animal, might also be called yellow or light red or light brindle and dark brindle. When you start going back through those original old animals, you really have to take it with a grain of salt, because they just looked at an animal and basically went, well, it looks light red to me. Or, oh, hey, they just, and we allowed that kind of a naming protocol. Mm-hmm. So when you look, you'll see like light reds, dark reds, light brindles, dark brindles. You go back far enough, you see animals identified as being blue. Wow. It's just all over.
Who was it? Paul Bunyan that had the blue ox, right? So maybe, yep. maybe even goes back that far, or maybe they were all colorblind. I don't know. I'm actually colorblind, so
well, you're in luck then. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are the registerable colors today through the association?
So we have black, dun, silver, red, yellow, white, brindle. Those are the accepted colors. Party colored animals are registerable if they are a heifer. The office will require a DNA sample. They want to prove parentage. They'll also ask for pictures of the animal because they're looking for a certain percentage of white on the animal and where the white is in order to determine whether or not it is actually a party colored animal. Bulls are not registerable. Heifers, while they are registerable, you can't show them. So different associations have approached party colored animals differently. And we refer to them as basically being partially acceptable in that we do register them if they're a heifer. Scotland has the same. I don't know if Scotland allows the heifers to be shown or not. But they do allow them to be registered. Bulls can't register them, can't show them. I think Australia doesn't allow any registration of party colored animals. It's just kind of this odd little hole we have with that color. The woman who wrote A Keen Eye, Una Cochrane, when she did research on it, she traced it back to 2 different animals, both to like somewhere in the 1880s. So it's a color pattern that when she did her research, she's like, it's been there. It's been there for a really long time, but it's not viewed very favorably.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's interesting because I only recently heard about party. So yeah, that's definitely interesting. You mentioned DNA testing through
I forgot to mention, did I say brindle? I might have forgotten brindle.
I think yeah,
Brindle is a
you mentioned it earlier.
brindle's a red color. Yeah.
Registerable color. So you were talking about getting the animal DNA tested through the association. Can you just briefly explain that? Is it a hair follicle, or what are you sending in to get
Right.
tested, and how do you do that?
So right now, anybody who registers a bull has to submit a DNA sample, and usually that is in the form of a hair sample. You're pulling a chunk of hair that's got hair follicle attached to it. If you AI your calves, if you do embryo transfer, that is part of the process. Is you have to submit a DNA sample because you're parent verifying the animal. With the party colored, if it's live cover, don't have to go through that process for your heifers.
Right.
So with party colors, they want to verify that they know who the sire is. And that's part of what parent verification does, is you're verifying parentage. So when you register, they send you out a DNA packet so that you can submit, and your DNA packet goes to UC Davis. Okay. And then they do parent verification, which for me is just kind of, it would be just a normal thing because so many of my animals up until this year are a product of an AI program. So all of my heifers, I have to submit hair samples anyway.
Okay, sure.
So they're going there because all bulls that are registered are in their database. So they're doing a comparison to verify that the animal is what it, is out of Highland. It's out of Highland parents is basically what they're looking at. But there is no color test to confirm an animal is a party colored animal. We don't have that test. There is no research. We don't know the genetics that cause it.
So so you really wouldn't even know if you're breeding for one, I'm guessing. You would just kind of get
it just right. And we see more of them now. And part of it is we're breeding more animals, and we also have more people on social media. Mm-hmm. So we're a lot more aware of when these animals pop up. But yeah, it basically, they just randomly pop up. You have a calf and you're like, oh my God, where did this come from? What is this?
Yeah.
It's got white up its flank, and like, where did this come from?
You're wondering if the neighbor's bull got in with your cattle at some point.
And you know what? What I usually tell people is when you have a calf that defies your expectation, the first thing you should do is rule out any potential contributor, like the neighbor's bull.
Or that 8-month-old bull calf that you got running around that you probably should have fenced off.
Exactly. Yeah.
In a different lot for a while. So I see a lot of people, it's constant on the ACA Breeders Group page. People are posting pictures and asking, what color is my calf? What color is, my cow? So on and so forth. What are just some quick tips? And I read some of these tips that you had on your post in the Northwest, on the Northwest page. But what are some characteristics that you can look for that will help you determine what color, especially, I guess, more so of a calf, because it is harder to tell with calves as they change. So what are some of those characteristics that you can tell our listeners to look for to help kind of determine?
So the first thing usually is, unless you have a calf that's born black with a black nose, assume that you're going to need to wait for about a week before you start checking pigment on the face to determine what they are, because it can take a few days for the pigment on their nose and around their eyes to either lighten or darken. Um, being born is hard, and sometimes it causes some weird things for calves, just like it does human babies. So give them a week so that they kind of have a chance to settle. But when people post, especially, they're the common one is they'll post a picture of a calf that they want to know if it's silver or if it's done. And that would be probably kind of a classic one where it's like, look at the pigment around its nose. How dark is that pigment? How dark is the eyeliner that they get? Because the pigment around the eyes will be some shade of black too. And their tongue, if you can get a look at their tongue, how dark is that tongue? The more, if it's a silver, it's going to be really light. You're going to look at it and you're going to go, oh, that's almost like a blue, like a light blue color, like a blue gray. So it'll be quite light. So, or the other one is, it's like they don't know if it's a silver or a white. And white animals, white calves, you've got to give them a little bit of time sometimes before you see that pink nose. I mean, I'm a classic example this spring. I had a white heifer calf born, and sorry, my cat is like, oh, look, aren't you a distraction? I had a white heifer calf born, and when I first looked at her, it was like, oh, I know who your daddy was. You're silver. Because I wasn't getting up close, and my phone, the camera on my phone, was making her pigment on her nose and around her eyes look darker than it really was.
Yeah.
And so then when I actually got a look at her, I was like, you're not silver, you're white.
Okay.
Which was still within the probability of what I could have. So I was like, oh, look, really what it told me was, I guess I shouldn't be in denial anymore. Your dam really is yellow and not red.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's
which happens a lot.
It's a long-term way of determining what color your cows are, kind of figuring out what they're throwing as far as calves.
Yeah, we visually, when you look at a red animal, dark red, medium shade of red, light red, where is that transition between red and yellow? It can be really, really hard to determine. And some of these animals, like the one I was like, well, I guess you really are red. Oh, she looks really pretty red. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's got like little pale yellow hairs around her nose, and her nose is kind of pale. So, when you look at her closer, you can go, yeah, I guess you really are yellow. But it took having a white calf for me to go, I shouldn't be in denial anymore. You really are yellow.
Yeah. But as far as color is it's such a large part of the breed, and I don't want to get into the market and things like that, but it plays a huge role into selling animals and the market and things like that. And there's obviously always two sides to it. I don't really want to get into that, but what I would like to get into is, if you want to breed for color, how do you go about it? And I don't even know if that's the right way to ask that question, but does that kind of make sense to you, what I'm asking?
It does. And I'm going to look at it a little, I'm going to spin it in a slightly different direction, because my feeling is that if you're breeding cattle, you should know how inheritance works. And color for Highland cattle is a very simple, straightforward introduction into how inheritance works. So breeders should know when they have a calf and they're like, how did I get that calf? They should know how to kind of backtrack and figure out what the probabilities of having that calf are. And so there's certain tools that you can use to do that. And when we register animals based on what we refer to as a phenotype. What do we see? What color do we see? We don't register them based on their genotype, which is what is behind what we see. So I have a kind of a different approach to coat color genetics in that I like people to understand that there is a formula for how you get colors. You shouldn't get too hung up on that formula because unless you have parents that have been color tested, you don't really know what is in front of you. And we can test for Highland colors. There's only 2 of them. So while we might register silvers and duns and whites, there really are only 2 colors, and that is black and red. Everything else is a modification of those 2 base colors, and it influences what we see. So we can test for black and red, the type of red that an animal carries, and we can test for what we refer to as a dilution gene. A dilution gene. So we can find not red because it's got a dilution gene. What we can't test for, because there's nobody that I'm aware of in North America that's running this test, is a gene for brindling. So we can't test for that, which is really too bad because if an animal is silver or white, it might be incredibly difficult to tell that they have that brindling gene. So there are tools. It's called a Punnett square that can help you figure out the probabilities of getting certain colors. And I did some of those. I did some examples of those when I was doing my posts. And they're helpful for determining a probability. But what I tell people is, doesn't mean that when you determine the probability and you go, oh, 25%, this is not 25% of the calves that will be born. It means that every time that breeding takes place, there's a 1 in 4 chance of that particular color.
Okay.
So you may never see that color. You may have to have 100 calves by that particular mating in order to get, 10 that are the color that you want. So there are ways to stack, if you want to breed silvers and whites, the best way to do it is to use silver and white animals. That way, each parent is giving a dilution gene to their offspring. But yeah, when I look at color and breeding for color, it's more like, well, so how lucky are you at the slot machines? So, if you want to breed for a certain color, and I know a number of people, they get a black bull because they want black calves. Well, the black bull is heterozygous. They've got 1 black gene, they've got 1 red gene. And lo and behold, what do they get? They get a whole bunch of red and yellow and brindle calves, not a black one in the bunch.
Right.
And so that has to do with probabilities, statistical probabilities. When there's a 2% of something happening, doesn't mean it will never happen. It could still happen. On the other hand, it may never happen. So yeah, I tell people that, a healthy calf of any color is a good color.
Right. And that's the thing. That's that I guess that's what I'm trying to avoid is color is very important. It's very interesting. I'm so glad that you came and talked about it today. But I agree with you 100%. Uh, there's a lot more that goes into it other than just color, and obviously health is a huge factor that we always want to breed for. So, but at the end of every episode, I like to ask everyone, uh, what is a piece of advice that you would give to a new breeder? A lot of people have said, make sure you have good handling equipment or a trailer or a veterinarian lined up. Um, so I am kind of putting you on the spot, but you have all the time in the world to think about it. Um, but just anything that comes to mind, uh, that you would want to pass along to someone who's a new breeder or just thinking about getting into Highland cattle.
Not so usually, the advice is to get a mentor. The
Mhm.
problem is that when you're brand new, you don't know who your good mentors are and who your bad mentors are.
Um,
Um, and and so usually the best place to start really is with those regional associations in a social fashion. So you just kind of get invited, ask if you can come, ask if you can learn, and don't necessarily look to form that mentor relationship. Basically, go in on an information gathering expedition,
mhm.
and do develop relationships locally with your vet, your local cattlemen. Um, Cattlemen are kind of a hard nosed lot,
Mhm.
and not being a cattleman, there's a certain mentality that some of it you really should adopt. So, when somebody's new and they're just getting into this, starting to learn to think a little bit more in a different way is helpful. And so there's not necessarily a single piece of advice. Yeah, you need handling facilities. Yeah, you need to get your fences in order before you bring your animals home. Yeah, you need to develop that vet relationship or you're screwed because you're going to need them sooner
Right.
or later. You do need them. And yeah, you do need a mentor, but you're probably not in a position to be able to sift through the mentors that you really want to learn from versus the ones that you don't. And that that's not necessarily a it's not necessarily a statement on, some people have better breeding practices than others. I mean, that's not really it. It's more about you want to learn from a mentor who who shares the goals that you have, similar farm type, like I don't have really anybody that can help me with my unique environment. I have to learn from my local cattlemen about that. And even then, it's wrong. My vet had me overfeeding my cows in the worst sort of way.
Sure. Yeah.
So but I mean, I've had to learn some of that stuff from my local people because there there is no one breeding Highlands in the same environment that I am.
Mhm.
It's just a very unique little valley. It's got some unique challenges. I I make jokes about, this is where good Highlands come to wash out.
Mm.
And yet it's like, really? Why? Like what's so different? It's just different. So,
Mm.
so I've had to learn a lot from my local people. And but yeah, it starting out, you don't really have the ability to look at all of these different breeders, and some of them are big names, some of them aren't, and you don't know you're not really able to evaluate who's going to be able to understand your unique needs, the farm model you want to adopt, the kind of growing conditions you have on your farm. And so you have to really spend some time with yourself making a list of like, what is my farm model going to be? Like what is unique about my farm? And if you sit there and you go, well, lots of people have farms just like mine, you've got more options. It took me a lot of trial and error to figure out, like, why do things not work here? It took a while. And then, I was very judgmental about the way a lot of cattlemen around me were doing things. And after a while, it was like, well, now I get it. Like, now I understand. So, you have to you have to take some time to really write down your goals and be really clear. So when you're going out and you're looking for people to learn from, you're picking people in a more targeted fashion than just, hey, I like them, I get along with them, great. Because honestly, most Highland people are incredibly welcoming. I mean, from that particular standpoint, we are a very helpful lot.
I agree.
Like we're always wanting to help.
Right.
But the problem is that, what works on your place doesn't work on my place. And I fall into the same trap. I have some of the best forages in the world in my valley. And sometimes I'm like, really, you have to feed them all of that? Without realizing that, they've got just horrible hay.
Yeah.
So of course they have to feed them all this other stuff. Right. So yeah, it's all different.
I love that, Jennifer. That is excellent advice. But that's the advice that I feel like we're honing in on some of this knowledge that we're trying to get out of people like you that have been doing it and pass that information along to those new breeders. Because we talked about, in the past we've talked about regional associations and finding a mentor, but now hearing you give your advice on how to kind of hone that in and figure out what is regionally what is best, but also how to go about seeking out a mentor. I love that. I love that. Just going and trying to get information, not going out there and trying to be their best friend and, hey, will you be my mentor? But, just getting your foot in the door, I think is great advice for new breeders. And then hopefully through that, there comes more of a long-term mentorship. But I love that. I think that's really good advice. It's very specific, and I really appreciate that. So anything else?
No, I think for me is, and I said this when I used to be, when I would ride a lot, it's like, I've been riding and working around horses for decades. And yet my mentality was, well, I'm still a novice. And I say that in that I was constantly seeking out information and constantly learning. And that I realized that, learning is an evolution. And so, breeding and having cattle, there's a learning curve and there's an evolution, and you have to be flexible enough to not get too stuck on just one thing. Be open to possibilities.
Right. Because at the end of the day, we are their caretakers and we have to do our best.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and mine were telling me this morning that I was definitely their caretaker.
We have ours are on pasture, so they want nothing to do with us. They're just like, they don't even claim us right now. They're just doing their own thing. But thank you so much, Jennifer. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, mine are on pasture too. Unfortunately, they're on a pasture with a very invasive noxious weed that is just incredibly, just like, people should be happy that they don't have to deal with this. So I go out in the morning and I start removing the seeds from places where it'll be a problem.
Oh, wow.
And so I go out there with a brush and they literally line up. Like,
Oh,
hey, me, you know,
yeah.
me, my turn. And it's like it's the easiest way. I bag these seeds up and I burn them.
Wow. 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 Well, that sounds
Otherwise, I wouldn't be out there and they wouldn't care. But if they're like, yeah, this stuff is horrible. It itches. It gets
that
down
sounds,
on our skin. Rub
oh,
ourselves raw.
that's a full-time job just doing that, it sounds like.
Well, some of them won't let me touch them, and so those are good. I don't have to touch them. But the bull I have, he just stands there and he's like, I'm the bull. I get all of the attention. There's some about Highland bulls, It's
Mhm.
like, no, dude, you just stand there. I'm gonna come do my thing. And he's like, yep, I'm a statue. You just don't go away. I'm a statue.
Yeah, I love it when they're a statue when you're trying to move them. That's my favorite. Our bull, that's what our bull does. He just stands there and looks at us, kind of gives us the side eye. You have to like
Yeah,
jump up and down and wave your arms and just to get him to move. But yeah, they're
yeah. No,
the
my
best.
favorite is when you get behind them and start trying to push them
Yeah.
because they will. Yeah, that's my favorite. He's not a pet, in that he's never allowed to come into my space. I go into his space, and he just stands there going, I'm a statue. You can come into my space. Please now come into my space. He's great. Love him. I just love him.
Sounds like a good guy. Well, Jennifer, thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time. I am serious about maybe picking your brain again in the next year if you'd be up for it. If you could give us another hour or so of your time. But I just really appreciate all of your knowledge and your willingness to talk to us and pass that on to the listener. So I think that's it for now. Thank you so much, listeners. You can find Jennifer. I guess we didn't talk about this, but if you'd like us to, we can put a link to your farm if you'd like, or listeners can contact us if they want to get a hold of you. If that's okay, Jennifer. If not, we can
Sure.
edit it out.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, and the thing is that, anybody that's on Facebook, they see me. I'm easy to find. But yeah, I'll have you link to my farm Facebook
Okay.
page.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
We'll get Kimber on that since she didn't sit in on the interview this time. She does all the behind the scenes work anyway. She does most of the work. But thanks again, listeners. If you have any ideas for topics or people that should be interviewed or has information and knowledge to pass along, please get a hold of us as well. Our contact information will be at the end of that episode. So thanks again, Jennifer. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for having me. It was a
All right.
pleasure.